Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's okay. Many thanks for attending this morning's webinar. So today we've got Tracy Duggan from Skills Local. We're going to be talking about workplace resilience and returning to work. So there's a number of topic areas that we'll be sort of covering there, sort of, you know, an awareness of sort of when wellbeing and resilience is maybe dipping within the organisations, some practical steps when you sort of feel this is happening, and how to develop action plan, and a load of other bits and pieces that Tracy will go through. So today, just to let you know, we will send out copies of slides, and there will be a recording of this session. We'll check that if that's okay to send out. We will send out, so you don't need to take copious notes. Just a quick run through with regards to the toolbar on the right. So we're going to try and keep this as interactive as possible. If you look on there, you can keep that toolbar open by clicking on view and unchecking the auto hide. There's a chat function there. That chat function, if you type your question in there, that appears in a list, and we will come to those questions and we'll put those to Tracy as we go along. Also, at a certain juncture that you'll see a raised hand insignia. If you want to raise a hand, we can unmute you. Everybody's muted at the moment, and you can ask a question directly to Tracy as well. And there's going to be a couple of polls where you can make a choice and submit your answers on that as we go ahead. So without further ado, so we'll cut to the main act. I'm going to hand over to Tracy, and you know, please keep asking your questions as you go along. So enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. That's brilliant. And welcome everybody to this workplace resilience and wellbeing webinar. I'm really excited to be here today. I was that excited I actually put my makeup on and I actually trimmed my own fringe. Does it look all right? And I'm sure we've all been doing some of that ourselves as well. So today's webinar, as I said, we're going to be exploring resilience and wellbeing in the workplace and why it's important for us to keep an eye on our own well-being and resilience and that of our teams as a whole. And it also impacts on our organisations as well. So as Ian said, we're going to try and make it as interactive as possible. It is quite challenging when you're doing it by a virtual webinar, but we will try and pick up any questions as we go along. So please feel free to ask any. Okay, so what is our agenda for this session? We're going to obviously welcome, it'd be really nice, I'm going to do a bit of an introduction about me. We're going to be looking at what wellbeing and resilience is, some of the opportunities and the challenges that they present to us. We're going to look at the size of the problem and why we need to be focusing on health and wellbeing and resilience as we move out of the pandemic and the challenges that's given us to our organisations. I've also managed to get hold of a return to work survey that I don't know whether any of you are aware of, a lady called Beth Pipe. She's very proactive on HR Ninjas, and she did a really useful survey about 3 weeks ago. So it's very relevant to our topic today. So I've got some of her results from that as well. We're going to be doing a quick raw self-assessment, and raw stands for workplace resilience and wellbeing self-assessment, and this is a bit of an activity for you guys to have a look at. And then we're going to be looking at the next step. So what after this webinar can you start to introduce to your own organisations? And then finally there'll be an opportunity to ask any further questions. So I don't know whether there's any questions so far. Hopefully you're all in the right webinar. Okay, we'll move on then. So our objectives for the session today: understanding the challenges and opportunities and why we need to be taking action, understanding resilience and well-being, and identifying some of the triggers that you can be looking out for, and working with your managers to help them to identify some of the triggers that can say, look, we are having problems here as a workforce. The idea of the session is to support you and your teams, to help you get more out of your teams, to make them more high performing and ultimately more resilient. Very little bit about me. I'm actually a board member with Business Peak District as well as managing my own business. I've got over 20 years experience working with a range of public and private sector companies in a range of national senior management roles. I am currently a certified practitioner for RAW, which is Workplace Resilience and Wellbeing, and we're going to be exploring RAW a little later on in the webinar. I'm also an Investors in People practitioner, and recently they've just relaunched their Wellbeing standard, which is a really useful framework. So if you've not had a chance to have a look at it yet, it can be very useful. We're not going to be discussing that in any detail at the session, but if you want to speak to me afterwards, I'm more than happy to have a conversation about any of these particular areas. I'm also a mental health trainer and generally supporting businesses to develop strategy which introduces best practice and encourages employee engagement. So that's a little bit about me. Okay, so why are we sort of looking at wellbeing and resilience as a challenge? I thought it would be useful to really just sort of position this because in 2017 Theresa May commissioned the Farmer Report, and a lot of the statistics in this presentation have actually come from that. So it's well worth a read if you've not had a look at it yet. And her quote was, "Many employers are already creating healthy, inclusive workplaces, but more needs to be done so that employers provide the support needed for employees that have mental health conditions." And to give a little bit of balance and actually bring it up to date, there's a quote there from Keir Starmer which says, "The impact of coronavirus outbreak on mental health is a hidden cost of the pandemic." So this is why I think this topic area is so important and something that we all really need to be aware of and working towards within our organisation. So if we've not already got any activities already, now is the time to start exploring what you might introduce now. Okay, so there's a couple of definitions there for well-being and for resilience, and I'm not going to read those out to you, but we will, as Ian said, we will send the slides to you. I wanted to talk about what the CIPD's definition of well-being and resilience is, and they talk about it as being able to create an environment which promotes a state of contentment which allows an employee to flourish for the benefit of themselves and the organisation. So when you start to look at it in that respect, you can see how that then starts to impact on your overall strategy, your overall organisational strategy or team strategy. And by having healthy well-being within the teams, you have then got that opportunity to create high-performing teams. Okay, a quick slide there which actually explores some of the costs if we actually don't do anything. And these are quite significant, and these were taken from a report which was by Deloitte, and these figures were actually used in the Farmer Report. So if you are looking for the source, then you can go out and have a look at that. But the cost to employers, which looks at things like absenteeism, presenteeism, staff turnover, is between 33 and 42 billion. The cost to government is 24 to 27 billion, and that's in things like benefits, lost tax, national insurance and NHS costs. And we've seen a lot of that following the pandemic, and a lot of people talking about that now. The cost to the economy is also huge, with between 74 to 99 billion. And I think what's really important as we move forward, and the sidebar there talks about, since COVID-19, people like Twitter, who are now going to be getting all of their, who've said all of their workers can now actually work from home. And I think that actually suggests to me that, you know, we've been putting things in place on a sort of temporary measure, but if we look at what's normal in the future, lots more people will actually be wanting to work from home. So we will need to really consider what that looks like in the workplace. When we start to look at, the CIPD did a big piece of research in May this year, and 35% of employees, if they had a health and wellbeing problem, didn't feel comfortable to approach anyone. And 41% of people that were questioned felt that the organisation was reactive rather than proactive. And out of the organisations that actually did some activity, 89% of those felt that they actually reaped some positive outcomes by introducing health and wellbeing. Okay. So it's clear that organisations as a whole will need to start to consider health and wellbeing as part of their overall people strategy. Now, looking at the opportunities, these statistics on the left-hand side were taken from the CIPD report. And again, if you've not had a look at that, it's really quite interesting. By introducing health and wellbeing, 56% of employers said that it improves morale and engagement. 52% it said it makes a healthier and more inclusive culture within the workplace. And a really important figure there, 32% says it lowers sickness absence, because you're being proactive, because you're actually picking up on issues before they become major challenges. And there are a couple of other statistics there. And out of all of those, only 11% said they got no benefits. 3% of them were explaining that it was too early for them to tell. So not very many that have actually engaged in activities that could say that there wasn't any sort of real benefits. In terms of giving some balance there, I thought it'd be quite interesting just to explore some of the challenges around introducing health and wellbeing within the workplace. And for this particular, for introducing strategy, it's really important that you explore what your people want. So maybe starting off with something like an employer survey to really see how your staff are feeling. So it basically requires quite a bit of planning, and it does require some resources. That suggests that you actually do need to get your senior management team bought in, and all of the research that's a key activity, is actually engagement of your senior management team. So the final point there, an effective wellbeing programme should be specific to employee need and needs to have senior leadership buy-in. Okay. So we're going to go to our first poll now. Ian, if you can launch that, that would be fantastic. So what I want you to do now is to describe which your approach is currently within your organisation for health and wellbeing.
Okay, it's just loading up.
Thank you.
I think it might be my internet connectivity that's probably the downfall of this. Let's see how it gets on.
Technology.
Yeah,
is that gone?
It looks like, yeah, people are filling it in.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
How are we doing?
I'm going to close in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Perfect.
And I'll share it.
Fantastic. Okay. So we've already got 22 organisations on here that have got fully aligned health and wellbeing strategy and policies. That's fantastic. It'd be interesting. I mean, it's a shame we can't have that sort of discussion now, really, around the sorts of things that you are doing. But I think it's what's really good to see is that everybody has actually got some form of activity already established for their organisation. And it's great to see that 44% of you have already got sort of health and wellbeing policies in place with sort of ad hoc wellbeing activities. So hopefully you're already generating and seeing the benefits that presents. Thank you very much for completing that. One of the statistics that came out of the CIPD report was that out of their survey, they surveyed 2,000 organisations. Only 44% of those had a wellbeing strategy. So for those of you that are sort of you've already got your policies and you've got some activities, start to consider how you can align that strategy so that it fits in with your values and your culture. And that will really start to reap the dividends as we move forward and we come out of the other side of the pandemic and COVID and everything and the challenges that that's brought. Okay. So we're going to now move on to look at the return to work survey I talked about in the introduction. And this was on Live Learning Limited. So I've got a little bit of a typo there. Apologies for that. Didn't spot that earlier. And it was really interesting for me because I felt this was really current, and it really did pick up on some of the challenges that we're going to see as we move forward, with staff that were working from home, staff that were still continuing working in the office, and those that were actually furloughed. And it sort of gives a bit of context really to the sorts of challenges and things that we need to be thinking about as we do start to reopen work and we start to bring people back into work. So for those that were furloughed, 67% of those, for those that were working from home, 67% said that they wanted to continue to do so. So it's quite a high figure. I mean, if we had the opportunity to start seeing if we had the opportunity to ask questions, we could ask what sort of things you were doing at the moment to try and balance that out, because I know that there's going to be a large proportion of people, I think, asking to work from home more in the future, which again brings challenges for how we balance out health and well-being and the resilience side of things. 45% of those who were furloughed would also like to work from home in the future, and that was an interesting one as well, because I think we're going to have some challenges as we bring people back into the office, or as we bring people back to working together as teams, particularly for those that have continued working throughout and maybe juggling lots of different aspects of that workload, and how we get people to start working back together as a team. And we've all heard of different Facebook stories where somebody's been putting on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram that they've done the whole garden and they've repainted the house, and the challenges that that's going to bring in terms of making that team bond again, so that they don't feel like they've been penalised. So there's going to be a lot of balancing that needs to go on within organisations. 56% of those that were surveyed are actually looking forward to returning to work for the social interaction. So don't discount that aspect. So if you are going to be looking at introducing more home working, try and figure out ways in which you can get people to still interact, maybe looking at different things like WhatsApp groups or Facebook groups, things like that, that can keep people socially interacted, but also really sort of embedded in what's going on in the working culture as well. 53% of those surveyed were actually concerned about the workplace being safe. So there's kind of mixed feelings there with people, and I think making sure that you've done your due diligence, and there's loads of resources and support out there. CIPD have got a fantastic resource, ACAS again, so lots of free available support out there to understand how best to make that workplace a safe place to be, and lots of government advice as well. So make sure that you are following all that, and also make sure you're communicating it. That's the key thing here, is the communication. Okay, so other comments from the survey are things like, will the organisation survive? So looking at the future, people are concerned about that. Childcare, and how will they cope if schools aren't reopened, and the other challenges it brings if you're working from home and trying to juggle childcare. Is it safe to travel? That was a key thing that came out, and whether there'll be clients to return to. There are some other things there, people saying that they were less stressed working from home, but that did depend on whether or not they had children who they were trying to homeschool as well. And again, the key point here, and the reason for mentioning this, is that understanding the challenges will help you to ensure that your people are going to be in best shape when they do return to the workplace. Okay, I talked about the triggers and some of the early warning signs. And these are the things that I think you need to be sharing with your managers and your team leaders and your supervisors, getting them to be really interactive and understanding of some of these early warning signs. So things like loss of interest in activities. So if you've got somebody that's generally always engaged and all of a sudden they start to take a bit of a back step, understanding how you can pick up on that and start to have those early conversations so that you are being more proactive as an organisation. Things like underperformance, identifying that, and again, changing personality, hygiene factors as well can signify and can be early signs that there are problems within or for an individual. So having those regular catch-ups will really support that moving forward. Any questions, Ian, at this stage?
I've got a couple. First one was just asking, you mentioned a HR specialist at the very start. Debbie, someone was just asking what her second name was. Was it right at the start? Was it Debbie?
Oh, it was Beth Pike.
Beth Pike. Ah, right. Beth Pike.
Beth
Okay,
Pike.
so that's it. And the other one was, again, from Catherine. How do you become a mental health trainer?
Well, there's a number of routes. I mean, I'm happy to pick this up afterwards because I think it depends on how you want to go about really doing it. I went with a company called Nuco. Lots of people go with Mind. There's various routes, and there's the mental health awareness organizer. I can't remember what they're called, but that tends to be the most popular route. So there are different routes that you can take.
Okay. If there's any questions anyone wants to ask now or raise the hand, we can pick ones up now, or we can continue on. Okay, I think we're going to continue on then. Okay, Tracy. Thank you.
That's brilliant. So we're now going to have a look at RAW, and this is the Workplace Resilience and Wellbeing tool that I mentioned right at the start. This tool can be used with individuals, teams and organisations, and you'll see it's made up of 5 pillars: energy, future focus, inner drive, flexible thinking and strong relationships. And it's made up, it's actually the world's first psychometric tool and survey which measures resilience and its impact on well-being in the workplace. It's a really useful tool at being able to identify where you have maybe gaps, where you, for yourself as an individual, for your team, it's a great way of identifying gaps so that you can start to address those. And for the organisation, it's a great opportunity if you are looking at building in that strategy of a starting point in understanding what is your starting point and where do you want to get to. So it's a really useful tool for that. Basically, the questionnaire for the psychometric is administered to individuals online. It takes about 15 minutes to complete, as well as generating personal reports, organisational reports and team reports. So you can use it in a number of ways. We're going to be looking at this from a very sort of quick and dirty example in a moment, where I'm going to get you to do a quick self-assessment. Okay, quickly, RAW is basically, by focusing on the 5 pillars, what we do is we create a climate of healthy high performance. It's actually fully validated and it's evidence-based model. So it's really, really robust in that respect. Okay, when we start to look at the pillars in more detail, you can see here we've got an example, and what we have here is oh, can you see my screen? There. Ian, can you still see me?
Yeah, no, everything's fine.
My video's gone for some reason. Okay, and this is an example of a survey, of a RAW survey that's already been completed, and you can see here that for the energy gap and for the inner drive gap, there is a 48% gap area, and that's actually quite significant when you start to look at how that builds up for that individual. The next lowest scoring area is future focus, which has got 38%, and then strong relations, 34%, flexible thinking, 22%. What we're actually going to do is we are going to have a go at scoring them. But first of all, I'm just going to explain a little bit about the pillars to you. So the energy pillar is the foundation for our physical and mental resilience. We all know that when we're feeling a little bit under the weather, we don't necessarily perform to our best. There are lots of things that impact on this particular area, such as things like, are we getting enough sleep? Are we getting the right amount of exercise? What's our diet like? Are we using tech before we go to bed? You know, all of these things can impact on our energy. And a recent survey suggests that in the UK, we're actually more likely to use alcohol than to turn off our phones. And this came out, I think, yesterday. It was 26% would use alcohol rather than turning off the phones. So this can potentially impact our energy. And I'm guilty of this over the past sort of 2 or 3 months of maybe having one too many gin and tonics. But I know that if I have a drink, it affects my sleep. So some challenges there for me. So energy really does impact on us, and it does actually, all of the pillars do start to link together. When we look at future focus, this is about our sense of purpose and direction and control. So this is going to be one of the pillars that's going to be impacted by COVID. And again, it's going to be really important to people. And as we saw from Beth's survey, that you know, there was quite a high proportion of people there that were actually worried about their future roles. So being able to address that and being able to understand how you can communicate and support people through that's going to be really key. The next pillar, flexible thinking, helps us to open up our options. And this is about moving away from that black box and black and white thinking. Having a strong score in this pillar helps you to think outside the box. I had a manager that used to say to me, come to me with the solutions, not the problems. And wouldn't we like everybody to be doing that? This is the one that helps people to be really resilient and to move forward. Flexible thinking helps us to really start to think outside and think about how we can develop our own solutions focused. And then the final pillar there is strong relationships. And strong relationships is about that teamwork. It is about that open door policy. It is about having people that you can go to when you need to ask a question and you are supported. Finally, the 5 pillars can actually stand in isolation. And normally what we would do, we're going to do a very quick and dirty poll in a moment. And I want you to have a look at the pillars yourselves and score the pillars for yourself. I'll just move on the slide. I want you to look at the pillars, and very quickly, we're going to have a couple of minutes on this. Think about which is your strongest pillar. Think about which one you need to pay attention to. And then what I'd like you to do, and I say it's very quick, is to score each pillar out of 10. And Ian's going to launch a poll for us.
Okay, Trace, do you want me to launch it now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And if you were doing this for real, you'd obviously be doing the questionnaire, which is it's a full psychometric and it's properly evidence-based. So this is just a real sort of rough diagnostic.
Okay, the poll should be launched and going out now, so please do fill it in.
So if you score each of your pillars out of 10, then do a total score, and you need to submit your total score onto that poll. Hopefully that's clear. Just ask if there's any questions, because it may be people have got some questions at this stage. How are we doing? Have we got anybody that's quick?
There's a few. We're getting them slowly but surely. I think we're just gonna. I think we've got a few percentage. Let's just give it another 30 seconds if people want to just have a think. And okay, I'm going to close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and I'll share that.
Fantastic, great. That's really it's really quite nice to see that we've got some really strong scores in there, which suggests to me that this team that we have on this webinar are really quite resilient and sort of focused on their own sort of health and well-being. So we've got 78% who scored between 30 and 39. And 11% actually at 40 to 50%. It'd be quite useful, you know, to have a look at that, what that looks like for your individual pillars. And I'm more than happy if anybody is interested in having a conversation offline about, you know, how you can maybe do some of this internally. Then I'm more than happy to have that conversation with you. And we do also have a little bit of a freebie available, so if anybody's interested in having a snapshot report completed where you complete the questionnaire. As I say, it takes about 15 minutes. I'm also going to offer a couple of mini coaching sessions as well as that, and I've got 2 places available. So if you are interested, then drop me a note at the end of the webinar, because you'll have all my contact details, and you could win a free place on that. So be nice to hear from you if you're interested. Okay, so moving forward then on that one, thought it would be interesting just to give you a sort of overview of RAW and actually who uses it already. As you can see, there's some big names that are using RAW already. And the reason they use it is because it provides them with really some clear, insightful reports, which starts to look at where they are as an individual, where they are as a team, and where they are as an organisation. It helps with personal development and planning, and each report comes with its own action plan. So one of the things that you get as a result of the questionnaire is the coaching that's built in with it. And that coaching really does help people to identify where and how they can start to build some of those gaps. And that's what we're going to look at next. Okay. So we're going to look at each of the pillars and some of the things that you might be able to do yourselves, or some of the things that you could do with your teams. And when we look at energy, we've already looked at this is about being the fuel and how you refuel. So how can you make that work related? So looking at going forward and moving into the new normal, the sorts of things that we've been needing to do is agreeing and establishing core hours, making sure that you're scheduling short refresher breaks for people to replenish and recharge. Some people, as part of their health and wellbeing strategies, will have yoga sessions. They may have breakout areas where people can just go and do a meditation. So there are lots of activities that you can do, and I have got sort of examples of best practice. If anybody is interested in any of those, more than happy to share them at the end. You may want to consider timings of meetings. I used to work for a company in London, and invariably they'd put a meeting on a Friday at 3 o'clock. So that would seriously eat into my weekend. Fortunately, I managed to get that changed, but being really considerate about things like that, and actually making sure that your managers are as well is a really sort of key thing that you can do to support that. When we look at future focus, understanding what you want and making it happen. So this is about being really clear about what the organisation strategy is, understanding what those priorities are and agreeing them, making sure that you're forward planning properly, making sure that people know who owns those priorities and how they are going to be communicated and shared out. We mentioned, I think, creating regular check-ins. This is going to be really important, particularly if you are going to move towards more people working from home. So ensuring that everyone in your team is aligned and understands their role in contributing to those agreed goals. And you can start to see now how the pillars start to build and work together in synergy. And you can see how they can stand alone as well. Okay, so inner drive, self-belief and motivation. This is about making time to agree collective strengths. This really does feed into the strong partnerships and strong relationships. This is about identifying any gaps in knowledge and helping to take action to address those. It's about noticing what's going well. So if you've got any awards schemes, I know that a couple of employers that I've been speaking to are actually looking at setting up some awards for helping them through this COVID position. So it may be something that you might want to consider. Notice what's going well, view any challenges, opportunities, and how you learn to grow as a team. Flexible thinking, ability to use imagination for problem solving. So watching out for groupthink. This is going to be one of the key areas moving forward. We're really going to have to nip this in the bud when it starts to happen, because what was the normal is not the new normal. And people saying, we don't do that around here. Well, maybe you might need to. So actually being able to embrace and encourage people to bring healthy challenge to discussions is going to be really important. And actually allowing people to be honest and open about how they're feeling. Recognising best practice, and this is something that Investors in People really encourages, is about sort of making sure that you are looking at the best out there and understanding what they are doing. Inviting stakeholders to offer suggestions for continuous improvements can be a really great way of doing that. And stakeholders could be your clients, it could be your customers, it could even be the people that you are working with. Okay, and the final pillar, strong relationships, how you connect with others as we move to the new normal, encouraging open conversations. So ensuring that your team meetings have time for informal and personal connections. So making sure that people have got that ability to bond, even though they might be working remotely or working differently because of the way that the pandemic has panned out. One of the key things for me is about how you book in set team meetings. So even if you've got no updates to share on the business, it's keeping that time in for general catch-ups. Or if you're like me and you want to create that social environment, maybe Friday gin and tonic at 5 o'clock if you've got a remote team could be quite a nice way of helping people to build those relationships. Okay, so the next steps, and I think sort of takeaways from today's webinar, and the reason I've put this together was to really get people to start to think, and it was really nice to see that there was so much activity already taking place from the delegates. But how you can really start to support your organisation and support your teams to really consider the health and wellbeing and the next steps. And some of the things that I've put up there, conducting a survey if you haven't done already, to really understand where people are, maybe using something like RAW to do that and to help you to do that. Making sure you've done your due diligence and the risk assessments that will help with that health and safety aspect and the key areas that people mentioned in Beth's survey about, sort of being safe at work. Consider mental health awareness training. Again, if anybody has got any questions, more than happy to take them afterwards if you want to send me an email. Consider using a national standard such as We Invest in Wellbeing. The framework is brilliant. It's been redone. I would encourage you to go and have a look at it. You don't have to, and I get told off by Investors in People, but you don't have to pay to do it. You could just follow it as a framework, and then if you do follow it as a framework and you get there, you may decide that you want to be assessed against it, but certainly it will make sure that you are embedding best practice within your business. CIPD, ACAS I've already mentioned. I've got wealth of resources, and of course I'd be happy to advise or to help anybody that wants to explore any of these areas in more detail. So that actually brings us to the last slide. Again, if you're interested in winning one of the mini coaching sessions, then give me a shout, and that includes the snapshot from the RAW report. They're my contact details there. Winners will be selected on a first come first serve basis, so getting quick. And we're going to open the floor to any questions. Thank you. Thanks, Ian.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you very much for that. So if anyone does have a question they'd like to put directly to Tracy, you can just raise your hand. I can unmute you and you can ask the question. Other than that, if you want to type it in the chat box, please feel free. As I said, the details for Tracy there for follow-up. If you want to discuss things in any depth, then please do contact, and Tracy's happy to pick that up. I'm just looking here. I think you've covered that much, Tracy. I think everyone's there's no questions so far. So if there's anything you want to wrap up with, Tracy, other than that, I think we might close the session, then people can contact you. Please make a note of the details and drop Tracy a line. So is there anything you want to close with, Tracy?
No, just thank you very much for attending, and hope to speak to you some in the future.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you, Tracy. Thank you for everyone. I'm sticking with the polls, trying to keep this as interactive as you can in these days. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of the week, and may see you at another one. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.